Hi, and welcome to Open, the show that opens the Bronx and the rest of the world to you. I'm Kibin Alleyne, and today we'll update you on what's happening in and around our borough. Coming up, Only in Theaters is a documentary that is about an intimate and moving journey taken with the Laemmle family, spanning nearly 3 years of challenges, losses, and personal triumphs. We are joined by the director of Only in Theaters to tell us more about this wonderful film. How did the Laemmle family impact the theater industry? Then many people are trying their best to eat right and make better choices to be healthy, but what many people are unaware of is how we are unknowingly eating microplastics almost every day. The Interim Executive Director for the National Capital Poison Center joins us later to give us more details and insight. How are microplastics getting into our bloodstreams? After that, the Biden administration has recently announced some proposed changes to the revised pay-as-you-earn repayment plan. These changes have not been made yet, but the public is encouraged to give feedback about these proposed changes before anything happens. A senior economist at Student Loan and student loan expert joins us later to tell us more. How will these changes help out millions of borrowers? And finally, many people are trying to become more environmentally friendly while protecting their home from inclement weather. The NYSERDA Director for Housing Decarbonization joins us later to share some advice. How could weatherizing your home also help you become more energy efficient? So stay tuned, all this and much more is heading your way because we're now officially open. Hello, everyone. I'm Kibin Alleyne, and today is Tuesday, January 24th. You are now watching Open, a live program bringing the Bronx and New York City straight to you. Don't forget to stay connected with us via social media at BronxNet TV. Known for his roles in television shows and game franchises, Raphael Sbarge also spends time behind the camera, documenting history, community and the lives of different people. Sbarge earned his first Emmy nomination for the documentary LA Foodways. Now he's here with BronxNet to discuss his latest documentary, Only in Theaters, highlighting the Laemmle family and the role they played in cinema. Let's take a look at this trailer.
Welcome to the theater.
Movie theaters
What the
dead.
hell is going to happen to movie theaters?
I hadn't heard of the Laemmle theater chain. As soon as my wife and I moved here, it became second nature.
I know people will ask, who are they? They're the premier art houses in the city. They are number one in that.
The theater business for a while just did nothing but make money.
The rise of television crippled Hollywood.
The other theaters had all closed during the early 50s when television hit.
I don't know if it'll ever come back the way it was.
Of the end for the movie theater.
How many movies am I going to go see this year? Probably 2.
Some call it the great art of the 20th century. The Laemmle theaters have always been a bastion of that great art.
Max was the key person in making foreign language films available and accessible.
The French New Wave found its home here.
They show movies the AMC won't show.
If you're from a place where there's no movie theater, the opportunity to see these films in a space like Laemmle becomes pretty monumental.
We've been feeling the pressure of the streaming systems.
The Southern California theater chain may be up for sale.
I would be devastated if they sold it, I have to be honest.
Where am I going to go to see these types of movies?
Let's remember that the movie theater is kind of a sacred experience for all of us.
If the film theaters disappear, the entire ecosystem is undermined.
How much sacrifice is required, in pursuit of the thing that you love?
International public health emergency.
Movie theaters will be closed to the public.
You feel silly and stupid worrying about things like getting movie theaters open when everything else that's going on in our country is going on.
Oh my goodness! Will enough people want to go in theaters to make the theatrical business still viable?
TV, home video, cable, DVD, 4K, having the same conversation for 125 years.
Take everyone you know into a theater, shoulder to shoulder.
The experience of a movie in a theater, that's when the heavens open.
We're always going to want, in some level, that experience of sitting in that movie theater. I'm going to believe that people are going to come back to that.
So Raphael, thank you so much for joining us to discuss the film.
It's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
So I want to talk a little bit about, before we, talk about the film, I know you have a very extensive background, working in acting, and I think that's really amazing, but, what inspired you to do some directing?
Yeah, I mean, I've been an actor for my whole life. I was on Sesame Street when I was 4, and I've done lots of Broadway. I've done lots and lots of films and television and video games, and I'm a storyteller. That's what we do as actors, and the opportunity to be able to the first time I directed, I was basically producing something, someone fell out, and I sort of stepped in, and there's a lot to learn in terms of, the technical aspect of how you actually create a visual story, as opposed to sort of doing it internally. And that's been fascinating. But it seems to be sort of a natural extension of me as an actor. It's just another way to reach people and connect.
So speaking of reaching people, you talk about, the theater business in your latest documentary, Only in Theaters. Can you actually give us, I know we saw the trailer, but can you give a brief overview about what the film is basically about?
Yeah, simply. It's about it's about a family. It's about an immigrant family who escaped the Holocaust, came to the United States, and did an extraordinary thing by creating what is arguably one of the most important theater chains right in the center of Hollywood, that had this sort of huge influence and has effectively been committed to supporting filmmakers, films and audiences for almost 100 years. And so it's about this family that did that.
Right. So as you mentioned, it's about this family, and they had a huge impact, on the theater industry. But I think a lot of people, so many people consume, movies, and we go to the theater. But, for those who don't know, can you talk about how they actually impacted the theater industry?
Yeah, I mean, the Laemmle theater chain is an art house cinema chain. Now, the art house cinema chain is different than an AMC, for example, in that it is focused more on independent filmmakers, of which I am, right? Independent filmmakers are outside of the studio system, and we generally, with our kind of, passion and I can do this kind of, and also an attempt to try and also find a way in. I mean, how do you start, right? How do you become a filmmaker? Well, at some point you have to make a movie, right? And if you make that movie, what happens is that you have to have a place to show it. And so these theaters have been a place where filmmakers can come, where they can be supported and given a leg up. And from that, all sorts of remarkable things can happen. And the people that I spoke to, for example, Ava DuVernay, whose movie that, she made a film that won Sundance, and she was a new filmmaker, and she tried to figure out her way to get a leg up, and she called the Laemmle theaters and said, give me some shows. And she did. And then she called New York and said, get me some, I got LA, can I get New York? And that just opened something for her. And she spoke to me because she knew that the Laemmle theaters had made a big difference in her career. Cameron Crowe, wonderful director named James Ivory, who's won the Oscar. Lots of Oscar winners, lots of really substantial filmmakers spoke to me because having a theater that really is dedicated to the art of film really is why we became filmmakers, what we love about going to the movies, and also really helps kind of elevate us past, there's a lot of noise out there. How do you get noticed? And this theater has been really focused on that.
Now, I'm so glad that you brought up and, talked about the difference between an art house theater and, something like AMC. And I could see somebody like Ava DuVernay, I'm like, wow, she's huge. But the fact that, these theaters were able to give her a start, I think that's amazing. Is that part of the reason why you really wanted to tell this story?
Yeah, I mean, so let me just start by saying this. Here we are in New York, in the Bronx. I live in Harlem. There's no Laemmle theater in New York, right? Why should I care about this theater that's in some other city that I've never heard about, and I don't even know what art house theater is? Well, here's the thing. There are art house cinemas all around the country, all around the world. And whether you know Laemmle or not, the story that we told, which was a personal and very specific story about this family, is ultimately about cinema, really, and about the future of cinema. And then also, hopefully, if it's not too grand to say, about the American dream. I mean, this is a 4th generation family business. We all know family businesses. There are complexities in family businesses. And how do you keep it going? How do you keep that family mission moving forward? And that's what they've done. As far as, art house generally is focused on independent documentary and foreign films. Now, look, streaming has come in strong. And I'm, I partake in streaming.
Right.
But, the art of film, it is an art, right? It's not just something to kind of, hang out with. I mean, yeah, of course, we all have stupid things that we watch to just kind of distract ourselves. But there are, it's a 125-year-old art form, right? And the whole design of this art form is to watch films on a 50 or 60-foot screen. If any of your listeners basically had, as we all know, the COVID shutdown basically closed all the theaters. Right. And if you've gone back to a theater, you've been reminded, like, oh my God, that was an experience. That was sort of a overwhelming, right, in a 3-dimensional way that you can't get sitting on your couch. And we all like convenience, but let me just ask this, COVID, if we take one thing from it, right? What, is it, oh my gosh, what I really need to do is continue to sit at home all alone on my couch and watch movies. Like, come on, get out.
I'm so glad that you brought that up because, the movie also touches on like how COVID, not only impacted like the movie theater business, but, we see how it impacted a family business. And, I think that's so amazing. Can you talk about why you really wanted to share the story, kind of make it bigger than just like, oh, these people who, give people a place to watch movies, but it was something that was so important to this family.
Yeah, I mean, look, I filmed this documentary over 2.5 years, and we started. I was initially sort of attracted to this incredible legacy story because there has been a Laemmle in the movie business since there's been a movie business. The original Laemmle, Carl Laemmle, founded a little movie studio called Universal Pictures, and discovered people like Valentino and Malloy and a young illustrator named Walt Disney, and essentially is one of the giant moguls that helped create Hollywood. This is this family who has, as I say, been in the movie business since there's been a movie business, and I was really struck by them. In the process of starting this, it then kind of, and this is the interesting thing about documentaries, sometimes you start with an idea, and then what happens is it ends up telling you at some point, it's like, the story's going this way. Now, if you're going to go that way, like, you can tell that story, but the story is traveling this way. Are you going to go with it? And I've been told by other documentary filmmakers that that's sort of the magic of this medium, is that, you get on the boat and it takes you, and that's what happened. We went through a lot of different sort of twists and turns, including, obviously, there's a section of the film that's about COVID, but it's much more than that. And as you say, it's really about survival. It's about resilience. It's about a family and their personal mission to try and continue to kind of keep going despite extraordinary odds.
Now that you have time to reflect, how has this project changed how you currently view the world of cinema, or, has it changed it at all?
Yeah, I mean, where we are at the moment, and again, perhaps you've seen the headlines, right? This theater or that theater is going out of business or filing Chapter 11. Maybe your neighborhood theater has closed. I actually interviewed a guy who was a sort of expert on exhibition. We didn't put this in the film, but you've heard of food deserts, right? Food deserts are, neighborhoods where there's no market, no food available to them in the area. So they have to literally go out of their neighborhood in order to be able to get food, right? So there is now a new term. It's called movie theater deserts, which is, in this case, you've got the cinema, which is in that town, and it's closed forever.
Wow.
And it will never come back, right? Sometimes that's because there was no business. Sometimes that's because they want to build a condo or something else. It is real estate, and we understand that real estate is valuable. But in this case, the question is, if we're not sort of, I guess I want to say we're at a fragile moment, and as we're all coming back to whatever this new normal is. And again, this movie, it's not a COVID movie. It's just a small element. It's 6 minutes in the movie, but it is a larger discussion about the future of exhibition, what it means. And let me just even go a step further, which is something else that I discovered. Here we are at a time when we know there's enormous spikes in depression and anxiety and chronic loneliness, right? There is something to be said to finding places where you can be socialized, where you can actually, come into a dark movie theater,
right,
come in as strangers and leave as friends because you've all had the shared experience, right? There's something about that I think is innately, we're social animals, right? So there are reasons above and beyond, oh, heck, there's great popcorn and don't you want to go sit in the theater? There's actually other things where we are finding places to sort of reconnect. And that's what movie theaters, I think, bring us. And I'm more aware of that than ever.
Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us and, sharing this with us. And I was definitely interested. So thank you once again.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
To find out more about Only in Theaters, please check out their website at www.onlyintheaters.com or follow them on Instagram at OnlyInTheatersMovie or on Twitter at Only_in_theaters. Don't go away. We'll be right back with more Open right after this.
I don't know why you're so sad. You've got a roof over your head.
Bro, you gotta stop with that depression stuff. That's a white people thing.
Escúchame, en esta casa los hombres no lloran.
You alright?
It just feels like it's coming from everywhere.
Do you want to talk about it?
Thanks for hearing me out, bro. Appreciate it.
You can talk to me if you're feeling sad.
Whenever you need to talk, I'm here, okay?
Kids!
I don't want to talk about it.
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 Families don't have to talk about everything, but they should talk about how to plan for an emergency.
Kids, you all right?
This family's prepared. Get tips and resources to make your family's emergency plan. Go to nyc.gov/readyny or call 311 for more information.
Welcome back. In recent years, many people have become more environmentally and health conscious, taking efforts to eat healthy, stay active, and shop organically. However, these steps may be threatened by something called microplastics. These tiny particles may be causing a huge threat to our ecosystem and our health. Joining me for discussion on this is Co-Medical Director, Interim Executive Director for the National Capital Poison Center, Dr. Kelly Johnson-Arbor. Doctor, thank you so much for joining me.
Good morning, Kibin. Thanks for having me on today.
Now, I want to jump right into it because when I heard this word, I was like, what is that? So can you just talk about, microplastics and what they are?
Sure. So microplastics are just what they sound like. They're little microscopic pieces of plastic. So when we use plastic, we frequently will discard it in the garbage, maybe try to recycle it. But that plastic does break down over time. And when it's in the water or when it's exposed to the air, it can break down into these little tiny pieces of plastic that you may not even be able to see with the naked eye. They might be like less than, a millimeter or two in size. And those can persist in the environment for a very, very long time. And so when we talk about microplastics, that's what we're talking about. These little tiny fragments of plastic that just stay around in the environment for years and years and years.
Wow. Now, it is said that we might be consuming over 900 pieces of microplastics. How are these microplastics formed?
So again, when we use plastic and we discard it, it usually goes into a landfill. It may end up in the water. And when it's exposed to water or windy conditions, these pieces of plastic just break down over time. So plastics do not biodegrade well in the environment. They persist forever or for a long time. But over time, they do break down very slowly into these little tiny pieces called microplastics. And so that's how they're formed. Pretty much any time that we use a piece of plastic, we are contributing to the development of microplastics within our environment.
Now, I think this is the part that is very scary to a lot of people that it's actually, we're consuming this and it's getting into our bloodstreams. Can you just explain how that is actually happening?
Right. So these pieces of plastic, Kibin, are very small. We can't see them, but they're all over the place. They're in the water that we drink. They're in the food that we eat. They're even in the air that we breathe. Again, they're so small that we can't see them. If you drink bottled water, for example, some people might want to choose bottled water to drink instead of tap water, thinking that it might be healthier or have less contaminants in it. But bottled water is contained within plastic bottles frequently, and those plastic bottles do contain little pieces of microplastics that will be consumed into our bodies when we drink the water. So it's essentially impossible for us to avoid exposures to these microplastics, and they do get in our bodies on a daily basis.
Well, I was just going to ask, are there any regulations to avoid microplastics in our food or everyday items that we use? But you said it's almost nearly impossible. Do you know if people, are still trying though, just to make sure that, they aren't getting into our food or, the things that we drink?
So it's pretty hard to regulate them in food because, again, a lot of foods do use plastic packaging, whether it's a plastic wrap or a plastic container. Plastics are, for better or worse, part of our daily lives these days. There was one law that was passed back in 2015. If you think back several years, we used to have little beads that were present in cosmetic products and facial exfoliators and hand sanitizers and other cosmetic products. And there was a law passed in 2015 to ban the sale of those products in the US because those little beads are more or less microplastics. And so microplastics have been phased out of rinse off cosmetic products. So this would include facial exfoliants and shampoos and body washes and even toothpaste. But in terms of foods, there's no laws that I know of that prevent the use of microplastics in foods. And again, anytime that we do use plastic in our lives, we are going to be exposed to those microplastics. So in foods, unfortunately, microplastics are still there.
Now, I want to quickly talk about, the skincare and the makeup, because I remember that being a thing and people saying, don't use these exfoliators because they could have microplastics in them. I know there was that law, but exfoliators are still on the market. So is there possible that, it's still in your skincare?
So it is possible. For products that are brought in from outside of the US, for example, I don't know that around the world that there are the same laws pertaining to the avoidance of microplastics in cosmetic products. So it's always good to look at the product that you're using. If it's a product that was manufactured within the United States, it should not contain the microplastics if it's a particular rinse-off cosmetic product. But again, I can't say that that's true for products that were obtained or were created outside of the United States.
Now, I want to touch on the topic of food again. I think this could be disappointing to so many people, but does this also apply to food or items that are marketed as organic or maybe sold in certain places where they try to stay away from things like plastic? Is it still in those types of food as well?
So it can be. It's interesting because organic really refers to the avoidance of pesticides and certain additives in food products. It doesn't really pertain to the use of plastics. If you get foods from an organic grocery store, they can still be packaged in plastic materials, and that will contribute to the presence of microplastics in those foods. If somebody is trying to avoid microplastics, they can do certain things. I mean, you can't completely avoid these plastics, but you can minimize your exposure by doing things like avoiding the use of plastic utensils, avoiding the use of plastic takeout containers, using stainless steel or other metal containers, and even just not using plastic, reusable plastic bags. Those just minimizing our daily exposures to plastic is probably the best way to reduce our exposure to microplastics. But again, plastics are everywhere. They are ubiquitous in our environment these days, and it's pretty hard to avoid using them.
Now, you talked about like staying away from certain things like plastic bags. I know in New York, there was a ban on plastic bags, like, getting them from the supermarket and stuff like that. And that was just like one step to help. What are your thoughts on things like that, when the law gets involved and say like, hey, let's try to reduce our use of plastic?
I think it's a good idea because, again, we, as consumers, we're just used to the convenience of plastic products. They make our lives much easier. I think it's very hard to imagine our daily lives without plastics. But we really don't consider is how long and how significantly they persist in our environment. Every piece of plastic that we use, we're going to discard or throw out at some time, and that is going to persist in the environment for years and years and years. It's not like you can just easily break down plastic. So I think it is good overall for us to be very aware of the quantity of plastic products that we are using and to try to reduce our exposures to those products.
Now, I want to touch on something that even shocked me. These microplastics may also be in some of, the cooking utensils we use, like Teflon pans. I was really surprised to know that, several media outlets are reporting that one crack on the surface of a Teflon coated pan could shed roughly 9,000 plastic particles. I want to ask, first of all, is this true? And, what should people, be feeling about, the stuff that they're cooking their food in is also probably releasing this type of plastic?
You are completely right about that. So there was a study that came out recently that did show that when Teflon is damaged, such as if it's scratched or cracked, it can release microplastics. So, like many things in our world, Teflon makes our life easier. But again, Teflon is a form of a synthetic plastic, so it can potentially release these microplastic particles when it is breaking down or when it's damaged. So, absolutely, when it's inert, when it's by itself and in good condition, Teflon is very inert. It doesn't really do much to our bodies. You can get some symptoms if you breathe in fumes from burning Teflon, for example. But when Teflon is damaged, absolutely, it's certain based on the available evidence that we have out there. When it's damaged, it can release these very small plastic particles that do get into our bodies. Now, the key is we don't really know what happens when those particles get into our bodies. We know that we are all being exposed to them. But again, plastics are very new to our lives. They've only been around in widespread use since the 1950s. So we don't really have long-term studies on what's going to happen when we are exposed to these particles on a daily basis. But we do know that they can get into our cells, into our bodies. And so they may certainly affect bodily functions, inflammation, maybe even cancer growth. But we need more research on that.
Now, are there, we talked a little bit about this, but can you talk about, is there any way that people can avoid these microplastics? What can people do? Should they possibly stop buying Teflon pans? What is the best course of action?
So, all right. Again, I think it's really, really tough to avoid microplastics entirely. They are all over our world every day. But I think what's really good for us to do as a whole is just be aware of what we are using, be aware of the amount of plastics that we use every day. And if possible, try to reduce our exposure to them. So if you can do anything, if you can cut down on, reusable plastic containers, if you can use metal silverware instead of plastic silverware, if you can use water that's packaged in metal containers, reusable metal water bottles instead of plastic disposable water bottles, these are ways to potentially reduce our exposures to these particles on a regular basis.
All right. And I also wanted to mention, I know there, like people say to use reusable water bottles. I know some of those water bottles are made of like harder plastic. Is that also okay? Or as you mentioned, like, should they just stick to metal?
I would say stick to metal. So regardless of whether it's a softer plastic or a harder plastic, once you throw that water bottle out, it's going to persist in the environment for decades and perhaps even longer and release microplastics. And also, while the water is in the water bottle, while you are drinking it, little minuscule pieces of plastic certainly may break off and into your body. So if you are somebody who is concerned about exposure to microplastics, I would definitely advise that you use a metal water bottle, a metal reusable water bottle, and just avoid use of plastic water bottles altogether if possible.
All right, Doctor, thank you so much for joining us and educating us about this topic.
Thank you again for having me on today.
To stay connected to the National Capital Poison Center, please go to their website at www.poison.org and stay tuned for more. We have more open right after this.
Even though we didn't grow up together, he's my favorite brother.
Hey, sis.
I'm the baby of the family, and he's the gentle giant.
What you know about Port Georgia?
Man, please, that's a classic.
You know when they say people are a rare breed? Yeah, he's that.
I'm sorry, I'll be back in a few hours.
Don't worry, Shug. You know I'm for you.
I know.
Go get the football.
That was my favorite memory. He was always for ya. This is a true story of me, Bridget Floyd, and this guy, George Perry Floyd Jr., my big brother.
Welcome back. As the fight for student loan forgiveness continues, the Biden administration announces some potential changes that would affect the existing revised pay-as-you-earn repayment plan. Senior Economist at LendingTree and student loan expert Jacob Channel joins me for a discussion on what this means for borrowers. Jacob, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Now, the last time we spoke, there was a lot going on in regards to student loan, plans, and there's a lot of legal issues, I should say. Can you just update us on what the legal status is of the student loan forgiveness program?
Yep. So unfortunately, it's pretty much the same as it was the last time we spoke. So in other words, right now everything is kind of up in the air. The Supreme Court has agreed to hear the case regarding whether or not broad student loan forgiveness is legal, in their opinion. So we will probably know sometime in the nearest future where this all stands. But unfortunately, as of right this minute, we really don't know for sure what the Supreme Court is going to say or what the overall legality of this plan is. So unfortunately, what that means for everyone is that we've just got to wait a little bit longer until we know for sure.
Now, before we get into the core of today's topic, can you just talk a little bit about the revised pay-as-you-earn repayment plan and what that is?
Yeah, so as the name implies, a revised pay-as-you-earn repayment plan, it is revising a current repayment plan that already exists that is designed to help lower income people keep on top of their student loan payments. So in a nutshell, what the plan generally is like I said, it's a type of plan that you can qualify for through the Department of Education that'll help you potentially, for example, lower your monthly payments or otherwise make repaying your student loans a little bit easier. The revisements to the plan are in a nutshell just designed to kind of make things a little bit more equitable, a little bit more generous, maybe a little bit easier to follow. So while the name is kind of a mouthful to say, if you want to play a fun game, try to say it 10 times fast, it's actually a very straightforward sort of plan, just designed to help people keep on top of their student loan payments.
Now, the U.S. Department of Education proposed new regulations to the repay plan that could cut monthly payments for millions of undergraduate borrowers in half. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yep. So like I said, the revising of this plan is really designed to make it a lot more generous in many respects. So for example, one of the things that the plan is aiming to do is not only increase income thresholds for people who qualify. So for example, individual earners earning $30,600 a year could potentially qualify for as little as $0 that they have to put for their student loan payments each month. So what this means more broadly is that across the board, for many people who qualify for this kind of income-driven repayment plan, they could potentially see their monthly payments be cut in half, as you said, or decrease by similar amounts depending on who they are, what kind of debt they have, how much they've borrowed, so on and so forth. So it can be a really, really advantageous plan to take advantage of, especially if you don't earn a lot of money, because best case scenario for you, you could still, be counted as making your payments by the government, so to speak, without actually having to shell out any money every month to keep on top of your payments.
Now, I understand that this is specifically for undergraduates. Can you explain why?
So I don't know if the Department of Education has come out and explicitly said, here's our rationale, but I think that there are a few likely reasons. So for example, when these topics come up, oftentimes people who are opposed to them say, well, you're really just giving a handout to the people who have money, because it is true, generally speaking, those with college degrees earn more money than those without college degrees. So I think that by specifically targeting undergraduate degrees, the Biden administration and the Department of Education are sort of undercutting that argument a little bit by saying, no, we're not just writing blank checks to people who earn a lot of money. We're specifically targeting people who do have college degrees, but are nonetheless not earning a lot of money, which is something that happens quite often in the United States. Outside of that, I think that there is some. The reality is that most people don't have graduate degrees. So this could be an attempt to sort of keep things streamlined, keep things simplified, and target the majority of people who would need this help, the vast majority of whom probably would not have a graduate degree. Keep in mind, only about 13-14% of college graduates have a graduate degree. So the reality is this plan not being there for graduate loans isn't really going to impact most people. So I think it's really a combination of factors, wanting to specifically target this toward lower income people who are more likely to not have a graduate degree, as well as just kind of keep things as fair and equitable as possible, and to undercut some of the criticism that maybe these plans are really just handouts for the rich or something like that, which is a common argument you might hear against them.
I'm really glad that you kind of brought that up, because I wasn't even thinking, I was just thinking, oh, maybe graduate degrees are just too expensive, or I just thought there was something else behind it. So I'm really glad that you kind of brought up some very reasonable and very realistic and totally understandable reasons why, it's specific to people who are, in undergraduate degrees. So thank you so much for explaining that. Now, how does the new proposed repayment plan compare to the current one?
Sure. So as I kind of alluded to earlier, the new repayment plan is pretty similar to the current one. But the big difference is that, in a nutshell, it just makes things a little bit more generous. It makes things maybe a little bit more streamlined. So, for example, the income requirements are a little bit higher now, which means you can earn more money and still qualify for this kind of help. There are other things that are really big deals. For example, interest capitalization under this plan is going to go away. So what that means is that if you're making a monthly payment, even if it's $0 a month, you're not going to have to worry about interest being added to your loans. Unfortunately, something that happens to a lot of student loan borrowers, and why a lot of people really struggle to keep on top of their student loan debt, is even if they make a payment, if it's too small, the amount of interest that's added to their loan will just keep increasing and increasing. So you can end up in a situation where you've made payments every month for the past 10 years, but have a balance higher than what you started. This plan is trying to get rid of that. So even if you're paying, $5 a month, the amount of interest you owe on your loan will not keep increasing, and the amount you owe will not balloon over time. So like I said, generally speaking, the plan really is just designed to make things more generous and easier to follow for borrowers who can qualify for this. And it's worth noting that, it's always going to be a little different from person to person. Every borrower, even every borrower who qualifies for this plan, is going to have a slightly different financial situation. They're going to owe slightly different amounts of money. So if you are someone who's thinking maybe this plan would be good for me, once it is finalized, it'll really be beneficial for you to reach out to the Department of Education or your student loan service provider and ask specifically, okay, what do these changes mean for me? Because they'll be able to tell you specifically, as opposed to what I'm able to do, which is give you sort of the general broad strokes.
Now, I want to touch on something that you mentioned, in that it was that, like, if your income is low enough, your payment could be as low as $0 per month. Now, I know for a lot of people that sounds really exciting, like, what, $0 per month? But you talked about interest, which I thought was very important, because I think a lot of people tend to forget about that. Just to clarify, if it's $0 per month, that doesn't mean that you're not required to pay anything back, right? Or could you just further expand on that?
Yes, so you're exactly right. So this is $0 a month payment. You're right, it does sound very exciting, but it is important to remember that that in and of itself does not equate to your loan being forgiven. So basically what the government will do under this plan is calculate an amount of money based on your income that you can afford to pay toward your student loans. So that number can be as low as zero, or it can be a few $100s a month. So depending on who you are, you could very well end up in a situation where the amount of payment that is calculated that you can afford to pay is $0. And if that's the case, you'll make $0 payments until your income increases or something about your financial situation changes that could end up modifying the amount you owe. So it is important to remember that that $0 amount may not last forever. In fact, it's unlikely to last forever. Hopefully your income will increase over time and your student loan payments will also increase. It's also important to remember that while there may be some situations where people will make $0 payments for a decade or more and potentially end up with the remaining balance forgiven, those $0 payments are, again, not the same as forgiveness. And eventually, you still technically owe that money. Eventually, your payment could go up. So don't see that zero and think, oh, good, I'm completely debt free. It's not exactly the same thing. And do remember that even if you are on this plan, you should keep an eye on your student loan balance. You should keep an eye on how much you can afford to pay. Because in a worst case scenario, even with protections that this plan provides, you could end up in a situation where you miss a bunch of payments or your payment is higher than you anticipated, and you could run into some financial trouble as a result.
All right, thank you so much for clarifying that. Now, the U.S. Department of Education is encouraging people to give feedback. Can you explain why this is so crucial?
Yeah, so the government really wants to be sure that this plan is actually helpful. And sometimes government plans aren't as helpful as was anticipated. So I think the Department of Education, the Biden administration, really want people to reach out and say, okay, here's what I think about the plan. Here's how it could help me. Here's where I think it could be improved. So what you can do is go to a website called regulations.gov. You'll be able to search up this plan. It's a public forum. You can provide comments. If you do get confused, if you're having trouble finding it, you can reach out to the Department of Education at ed.gov, ask for directions, so to speak. But really, like I said, the goal here is to make sure that this plan is legitimately helpful for the people who need the most help. So if it is something that could impact you, if it's something that you may even qualify for, or think you qualify for, or want to apply for, it's very important that you make your voice heard. I think it sounds a little cheesy, but it is worth noting that in the United States, ultimately, the people are the ones who make the decisions, even if it doesn't always feel that way. So if you want your voice to be heard, you actually have to go out and speak up. And so I think the government is really trying to encourage people to do that with this specific proposal.
And I want to very quickly just touch on, what this could mean for borrowers of color, because I noticed a lot of places kind of making a point to mention that this is going to impact those communities a lot. Can you talk about that quickly?
Yeah, so, an unfortunate reality in the United States is that oftentimes folks of color or members of other, minority communities end up, disproportionately saddled with things like debt or other financial burdens. So because of that, because this plan is designed to target people who are, dealing with the most financial stress, it's going to really help, in many cases, people who are, Black, Latino, so on and so forth. So while this plan is not necessarily specifically targeting members of minority communities, it's nonetheless going to have a very profound impact for a lot of those members just because of the way finances in the United States kind of shake out. So we could see a lot of aid and a lot of relief going toward, for example, the Black community or other communities that are trying to get ahead by getting a college degree, but unfortunately don't have the intergenerational wealth or the access to credit or things like that that can help them lower or graduate college without any debt. So basically, just because of how the cookie crumbles in the United States, this plan is probably going to be even more beneficial to people of color than a lot of other folks.
All right, Jacob, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
If you want to know more about LendingTree, please go to their website at www.lendingtree.com or follow them on social media at LendingTree. We have to take a quick break, but we'll be right back with more Open right after this.
you know dragging chains can spark a wildfire?
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Found my heart out there in the open. Trees make you feel small. Can't help but get lost again.
Feel the beat of nature at a park or forest near you. Find a forest and music inspired by nature at discovertheforest.org.
Welcome back. Many independent researchers and home energy contractors are encouraging homeowners to weatherize their homes. This is one step towards becoming more environmentally friendly while protecting your home from inclement weather. Emily Dean, the Director of Housing for the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, joined me for a discussion on weatherization. Emily, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Kibin. I'm thrilled to be here.
So I'm really excited to talk about this because this was actually the first time I've even heard of this term. So can you just explain, what does it mean to weatherize your home?
Absolutely. So really what weatherizing means is air seal, we also referred to as air sealing and insulating, is a way just to make the home more efficient. So there are fewer drafts, fewer leaks, and the home stays comfortable. So that means, sealing around the windows and adding insulation so that the home doesn't have to expend as much energy to stay warm and comfortable in the winter and cool in the summer.
Oh, wow, that's pretty cool. Now, is this something that's accessible to anyone? Like, can anybody weatherize their home or the place that they're staying at?
Yeah, I really appreciate that question because in New York State is unique in that our climate law prioritizes energy justice and ensuring accessibility for all and benefiting from the clean energy transition, including these critical comfort and cost-saving measures that homeowners can undertake. So a good first step is a resource that we have called New York Energy Advisor. It's a website where a homeowner or a renter can go in and put in a few demographic pieces of information anonymously and find out what programs they're eligible for. And that's particularly important in ensuring that low and moderate income households are directed to the programs that can provide them with no cost or completely low cost energy retrofits in their homes. So connecting them to the resources that can largely or entirely pay for the cost of weatherizing their homes and installing additional energy efficiency improvements.
Now, this is something that even though people may be familiar with it, it could be something that's new for them. How will someone know that this making this shift is right for their family?
Yeah, well, a great place to start is to do a home energy audit. That's basically kind of a review of the home just to identify improvements that a homeowner could make when they're ready to make investments, as well as to learn about programs, incentive programs that can help reduce that cost or maybe cover the cost completely. So NYSERDA offers a no-cost, free to homeowner energy audit. And so that's a great place to start. No risk. A qualified contractor comes to the home, does a walkthrough, and provides the homeowner with a report summarizing all the different improvements they could make when they're ready to make investments or upgrade those building systems, as well as a sense for how much energy savings those improvements will yield to help them prioritize the investments and make a decision that's right for their financial situation.
Now, did the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022 inspire this effort to make homes more environmentally friendly?
Well, I will say that New York has been really on the leading edge of climate action. We've been taking it very seriously, and that's embodied in our Climate Act of 2019, which really charts our course to a carbon neutral economy by mid-century. So we have been focused on this for a very long time. But what the Inflation Reduction Act provides is necessary infusion of financial and other supports to build out the resources, to build out the workforce, and to make these investments more economically viable for all homeowners. So particularly for energy efficiency and also clean heating and cooling upgrades, the Inflation Reduction Act provides tax credits as well as incentives to make those upgrades pencil and make them economically accessible for all homeowners.
Now, what will a weatherized home look like for people who live in a single or multifamily home?
So, generally a weatherized home a weatherized home is a more comfortable home. It saves energy. But in terms of what it looks like, there wouldn't really be much of a change to what the house looks like because many times it's adding insulation within the walls. And so there's going to be no aesthetic change whatsoever. So it's not going to look different, but it's going to feel different. It's going to feel more comfortable, less drafty, and it's going to cost less to heat and cool. So by and large, that's what a homeowner can expect of a weatherization project in a single family home. In a multifamily building, we're seeing that not only is this an opportunity for a multifamily building owner to improve the energy performance of their building and make their building more efficient, but oftentimes a multifamily building owner will actually use that as an opportunity to actually improve the facade of the building. So actually improve the aesthetics of the building while they're improving the energy performance and reducing the cost for them as a building owner as well as for their residents.
Now, what are some examples of home energy efficient upgrades?
So I think the best thing for a homeowner to do, particularly, in the time that we are in with, the geopolitical situation driving up, heating costs and utility bills, the best thing to do is to weatherize, to add insulation. And that is something that a homeowner can learn about through an energy audit. In addition to insulating and air sealing a home, certainly lighting and appliances can also have a big impact on utility bills. So upgrading to efficient appliances and high efficiency lighting, as well as taking the opportunity to look at their heating system. Many of us, including myself, I have a gas heating system, but I am making a plan for making a switch to super efficient electric heat pumps when my system ages out. So also having a plan for switching to cleaner, more efficient, and more comfortable clean heating and cooling technology when their heating system reaches end of life. And that also provides the benefit of cooling. So cooling and more efficient cooling than the window air conditioner units that many of us live with in New York City.
What are the major steps needed to get started on this effort?
Well, we aim to meet homeowners where they are in their journey, in their home upgrade sort of consideration process. So some homeowners might know what they want to do. They have a project in mind. And so the step for them would be to connect with a qualified contractor. So NYSERDA has participating contractors that have been vetted, that are required to have certain credentials to participate in our programs, and can also access the incentives in our programs. So that information can be found on our website for a homeowner to be able to undertake the project that they have in mind. Perhaps they don't know where to start, or they don't know what the most, the best return on their investment will be, and that's where we recommend the free home energy audit, just to give them a sense of the improvements that can be made at the time that they're planning to invest over the long run, so they can really improve the impact of those investments on their energy cost savings and their utility bills and the comfort and performance of their home.
Now, we talked about homeowners. How can people who rent apartments also partake in weatherizing their units?
Great question. It's not so straightforward. It's definitely more complicated. But for example, in New York City, larger buildings are required to benchmark their energy and water consumption every year. And recently, buildings have been posting scores, so letter grades on buildings. And so for a resident of a large building that has a grade that's perhaps not so great, not making the honor roll, that's a great conversation starter with their landlord, with their building, with a property management company, to have a conversation around what can be improved or what the building's plans are to improve energy performance. For low income residents, one thing that they can take advantage of is in-unit improvements. So both through our Empower program that NYSERDA operates, as well as through the Weatherization Assistance Program, which is a program operated by our sister agency, Homes and Community Renewal. Both of those programs will come into the unit and fund in-unit energy efficiency upgrades to reduce the bills of that homeowner so they can still reap the benefits of energy savings, even if it's not at the building level.
Now, people often believe it is expensive to live with energy efficiency in mind. Have you found this to be true?
I think that, that's front of mind for us as part of this, as part of, the core principle of our Climate Act and how we are approaching this transition to ensure that we put energy justice first, and the most vulnerable and the most financially challenged households front of mind. And so that comes into play with our programs. We have a program, Empower, which fully funds the upgrades in low-income households. We have another program that also funds retrofits for moderate-income households, providing a 50% cost share. So we really seek to minimize any barriers, but the first barrier is really reaching people. And so thank you for your help in getting the word out and raising awareness about these programs. And I really do encourage your viewers to check out New York Energy Advisor, type in a few pieces of information, anonymous, and through that, they'll learn about all the different programs, energy programs, as well as other resources that are available to them to help them with their energy goals, whether it's energy bill assistance or incentive programs for their home. So we really aim to make it accessible, and making it accessible and easy to participate in is the first step.
Now, what are some other efforts New York State is taking to protect our planet? As I mentioned, or as we both mentioned, New York State is very committed to addressing climate change. So, what are some of the efforts being taken to continue this?
Well, we're really working with all of our state partners to make climate action, to make sustainability a core principle of how all New York State agencies are investing, and and supporting through the programs that supporting the New Yorkers through the programs that they operate. So one example is working with our partners at the New York State Homes and Community Renewal. This is the New York's affordable housing agency. And they are taking an incredible leadership role in making really ambitious requirements of their developers for new affordable housing, and making affordable housing the premier example of how we can build sustainable, affordable, high quality new affordable housing and rehabilitate affordable housing to be a model. So all electric, high performance housing that is high quality, that is cost effective, and that preserves these affordable housing units in perpetuity. So we're really excited about the leadership that we're seeing throughout many of our sister agencies in committing to the cause of climate action as part of their core mission of affordable housing.
All right, Emily, thank you so much for joining us. To learn more about NYSERDA, please go to their website at www.nyserda.ny.gov or follow them across all platforms at NYSERDA. We've come to the end of our show. I'd like to thank all of our guests for joining us, and for you, the viewers, for tuning in. If you missed any part of today's show, you can catch the recable cast at 5 and 10 p.m. on Optimum Channel 67 and Verizon Fios Channel 33, or watch anytime on the web at bronxnet.org. I'm Kibin Alleyne, wishing you and yours safety and wellness now and always. See you next time.